And this was just kind of what the effort amounted to. You can see here that between May, the early part of May and late July, dozens of participants made sorties or trips. They made 36 trips here, sometimes as many as 7 in a week. And on only one trip did they fail to bring back data. Over 11,000 images were taken, and they've got funding in place to continue this mapping effort through January of 11. And I cite this as an example where this low-cost technique was applied to a real-world problem of immediate importance. And you can certainly visualize other more local phenomena and conditions where you might want to apply this. And then there's the trick. Once you have these images, you go, well, okay, now what? And so there's two things that are important here. One of them is that the kind of techniques that were used is this Gonzo Earth image processing is basically uses a raft of commercial off-the-shelf software, including Photoshop and other tools, to be able to prepare and stitch these images together. And then the cartage and knitter software is a really cool thing that Jeff Warren from MIT Media Lab has developed, which is a free web-based tool where you can upload your images and orthorectify them, rubber sheet them, resize them, rotate them, and scooch them around until you get a composite map. It's all manual, but it's a way that's really quite simple for being able to do this. And of course both methods export finished maps in standard formats that you can use in common workflows, or just in for your own purposes. So I'll just flip through a variety of examples of some of this work. I didn't bring it out, I have it in the back room, but I've got one of these Sutton flow-form kites, and this is an ideal platform for being able to use a kite in these kind of instances. This is an example where they're hooking up their package to an 8-foot weather balloon. And here are more of the kind of imagery that you'll see here. And in a number of these cases, you'll see instances of terrain with oil pollution landing on the beach, or you can see spots where you've got pollution. And you can also just see very rapidly that they've put together these high-res areas here. And this is kind of the alternative. In these cases, they just ran out of pixels in Google Earth. So if you wanted something better, you needed to do it. Jeff Warren was invited to the state of Georgia and worked with the Open Maps caucusing group to help them prepare a public domain map of the entire country. And this was a workshop he did with school children who were part of the volunteer effort. And he had a little checklist here, again, fairly simple, not unlike the illustrated guide. They were able to put together this map, and this is one which is produced out of cartage and knitter, which spans about 5.5 kilometers and was captured in just 3 days of balloon and kite mapping with the local staff and participating students. And I thought this was pretty interesting. They had GPS tracking on board, and this sort of illustrates the flight of the package that they had. And in some of these cases, they were up about 1.4 kilometers above ground level when they were taking these images. So what am I doing with it? Well, in Belize open source, I'm looking to apply these to that 40-acre property as I talked about it. And so far, what I've done here in the Bay Area, where I'm resident, is I've commissioned the mapping kit and processed test images here in Livermore. I don't have a trip set to get this down to Belize and do that mapping, but it's on my list to do fairly soon. And this is the motivation. Actually, you saw a version of this when Frank was presenting, but here's the Belize open source property. Here's a distinct set of roadways that help me to key this in. And so it's here, all right, but in 2 more clicks, you're out of pixels, if you remember that message that you get. And so for this is a little area which is an ag country about 16 miles from Guatemala and about 5 miles from the Mexican border, along a string of villages that come out from the nearest large town of about 20,000 people. And if you're interested, there's more information at belizeopensource.org. This is the kind of stuff that I've done here with this locally. So here's basically one version of my kit. You can see here's my neighbor Scott down the road having a good time as we launch the package aloft. The kind of images that you don't really need in Livermore, California, because you can do almost this good with Google Earth. But in a lot of locations where EWB chapters are working, that's not the case. Or if you're interested in something that's changing fast, like those oil spill images, or you're interested in something that the imagery just hasn't been updated that recently in Google Earth. This is a stitched image of that using these photographs from an early version of cartage and knitter before it had the ability to export. So here you can still see the handles and so forth that are on various images that were used to rubber sheet them and rotate them and twist them around. And you can see it doesn't have perfect alignment, so I would just put this up as an early test result. So I would just encourage people to think about this for their own projects. If you're interested, you can certainly get involved. Grassrootsrapmapping.org is the home site for all this. There's a wiki full of techniques and test cases. There's a very active mailing list. You know, if you've got something that you have a compelling need to do, you could start a grassroots mapping project today. There's a number of them. The Belize open source mapping is one. There are a number of initiatives using these kind of tools. A lot of them have more of a community land tenure sort of a basis to them, but others are just plain vanilla. Here's a tool. How could you apply it to your own project or something that you need to do? It's got a lot of folks who are collaborating and helping and supporting. I've listed a number of them here. A key champion of these techniques, and a lot of these, if you have experienced friends who are in aerial kite photography or radio controlled modeling, you go, oh, this is old hat. And that's true. A lot of this stuff has been around for a long time. This is almost the simplest bare bone implementation of this stuff you can imagine in terms of just being able to readily apply it and popularize it in a way that you could, it wouldn't be hard to envision that you could work with a community and a group of young people or students in that community and enable them to have the capability to essentially take this kind of imagery for their community from now going forward. So I take questions here and talk for a little while, but one thing I would like to do is make that a little bit short, and then as soon as we are ready, walk downstairs with a little bit of help, and let's go fly these platforms outside and see what we do. And for those of you who are brave and who have faith in strapping tape, and if you have your iPhone or your Android that you want to shoot video, some of you may have Quick where you can stream it to the web. You'll be happy to fly your platform on these things if you like. So that's all I think that I've got here. So questions in here? Hi, James.
Can we get some of those pictures?
Pardon?
Can we get some of those pictures?
Oh, absolutely. Why don't we do this? If anybody shoots video, I know Frank's been shooting a little video of this, or if any of you take pictures and whatnot, let's make it a point to assemble them and make them together, and we can provide them and make them a resource for the workshop and whoever else wants to look at them. I can certainly put them up on a Flickr account and the videos on a YouTube
page too.
Pardon?
We could put them on the SFP Facebook page.
Sure. Any way we want to use these. Actually, Jeff Warren and I talked about the stuff where I cite his material. And he said, this is all, from his perspective, just cite the sources, and it's all open use kind of stuff, and that's the tack he's taking with it.
Yeah, I was looking for the pictures as we.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Questions?
Scaling these pictures and getting it back into, would you just do that with ground marks? I mean, would you do some distance that you knew, or is there some better way to do that?
I think there's a variety of techniques you can do. There's some fabulous photographs that I didn't reference here that were from a kite aerial photographer who works out of Sonoma State University, and he flew in Peru, and he flew kites because, in his write-up he said, we had to ford rivers up to about here. No way I'm walking in the helium tank for those photos. But he laid out measured ground reference points in the areas that he was shooting, and then he used a semi-automated technique called Hugin, or H-U-G-I-N, maybe other people call it Hugin, I'm not sure, which is initially designed for, it's an open source tool for panorama photo stitching, but it can be adapted to these purposes, he said, if you are willing to suffer enough to be able to try and apply it. Whereas Jeff Warren's got a really simple tool that little kids can upload their images and do it. But so there's a variety of techniques you might try to do to establish that kind of control. And Frank might have some suggestions about how, if he was going to try and integrate this into a more traditional combination of survey work, how you might try and prepare the site or prepare your conditions to be able to do so. I don't know if you have some suggestions, Frank, on that.
Besides pre-marking locations, or having points that are readily available through the imagery, I can't think of anything else offhand.
In the Belize open source instance, I really do have some crossroads that are extremely well defined. They're highly visible in Google Earth. I know the distance, the survey distance. I've got an AutoCAD survey from the land adjudication work that was done in Belize in the last few years. And so I'm in pretty good shape for that particular application. But if you were out in a really remote area, what would you do and how would you apply it, and what would be the best ways? I think it's an excellent question. You just really need to think it through up there. Other questions before we go fly? All right, so this will be a little tricky to get down to the elevators, but we just need a couple of volunteers, and I want to get a couple of things out of the spare room to take down.